Sean McCracken, news editor, Hotel News Now, here with Dan Kubacki, production editor for Hotel News Now, and Kelsey. I know you're with STR. What's your official, actual title? Because I've lost track.
My official actual title is going to be Manager Analytics.
Okay, so Kelsey Fenerty, Manager Analytics for STR. And I'll point out, of those three names, one of them is less Irish than the other two. So, Kelsey, let's start with you, since you were in all the big sessions today here at the Hotel Data Conference. If you hear a lot of noise in the background, we're recording this in the middle of kind of the ending sessions, beginning of the ending of the day reception. So, Kelsey, what big themes did you pick from today? What were the interesting high-level things that you heard on the main stage or just around the show?
You know, I think it came up in all the main stage presentations and definitely in some of the data sessions, but it's going to be that we are seeing that softening of hotel demand and of hotel performance, and that we are heading into a recession. But I think the really important takeaway to that is that things aren't exactly as they've been in the past, and so that recession is going to look a little bit different than it did in the past for our industry.
Mm-hmm. So how, and different in what way, I guess, is the question. Different good or different bad?
Different good. Different good in as much as a recession can be good, because we've got a lot of really strong performance fundamentals happening right now. And we're also in a period, and this was the word of the day, and if I had to guess, I think we'll see it tomorrow, normalization. And as we continue to normalize in an industry and, get back to our normal pre-pandemic patterns of travel and demand, we have that underlying strength of that continued return to business travel, that continued return to group demand to help offset the impacts of a recession, which will be mild by recessionary standards, according to Adam Sachs. And if we can't believe him, who can we believe?
Yeah, Kelsey, I remember last year at HTC, you and Isaac gave is a recession coming, is it not? And you were kind of both arguing your points. If you had to do that talk today, I mean, what's different in a year?
I think what's different between last year and this year is that we have started to see the softening economically. We've started to see that slow down in the banking sector. We overcame those bank failures. That's not really an issue, but we are seeing credit standards tightening. We have much higher interest rates today than we did last year. And most importantly, we are finally starting to see inflation moderate. But the flip side to inflation moderating, which is so important both for our industry and outside of it, is that you do have to slow the overall economy to do that. And when you slow the overall economy, you lose a little bit of consumer spending. You might see a little bit of a drag on leisure travel.
It's almost like we've kind of had like little pocket recessions, right? Like with regional banks and the tech industry in particular. Like we didn't have a big, hit everyone across the economy recession, but there's definitely been segments of the economy that are behaving like it's a recession.
I think so, and I think you definitely see that in hotel demand as well, where we are seeing the more regional placed hotels struggle a little bit with demand this year. Part of that is that normalization again as well, but part of it could be that, those areas are in general struggling more with their economies, and you see it in the tech sector as well. More work from home tends to mean less business travel.
Mm-hmm. So if those are the big high-level themes for today, Dan, I'll start with you. I just want to get from everybody, what's just something interesting you've heard today?
Well, I sat in on the Group Size Matters session, and Dana Karras of Coral Tree Hospitality had some really interesting color on how his company's the different size of their hotels, ones with more meeting space square footage than others. We think of these big convention hotels. We're in the Grand Hyatt Nashville for HTC this year, and he talked about how these big hotels, they're still they're more recovered with like the group business that they're bringing back, because as he put it, they're not just chasing the big groups, the big fish in the pond. They're chasing big groups, but also small groups to really diversify the group business that they're bringing in. And the smaller hotels in their portfolio with less square footage of meeting space, they're not as recovered. And I just thought that was super interesting. They're going out after the little groups too, the mid-sized groups who might be willing at this stage to trade up with where they're going to host their conferences and their events.
Mm-hmm. So I have a few things scribbled down. The smallest of the three that I just thought was, I've never heard anyone say this, but I just found it so interesting. It was Steve Fitzgerald from Sojourn during a sales and marketing panel, was talking about how apparently insurance companies will up your premiums as a hotel if you have bad guest reviews, which is, I've never heard anyone say that, but it's just really interesting. Higher level. So it was Aaron Serrato from McKibben brought up the fact that obviously Taylor Swift has been a huge talking point in the hotel industry this year, just because, the rate and demand boost hotels are seeing along with her Eras tour. But the interesting thing she said is they internally did an analysis of how they revenue managed all concerts before the Eras tour and after. And she said it went from a big concert in a market would give them a 15% revenue boost to now afterwards they're expecting a 70% revenue boost. So it's not just Taylor Swift, it's basically the industry relearning how to revenue manage around concert demand. And I thought that was really interesting.
And I can just weigh in on that and say that we've seen that globally, actually, with concerts. A lot of our clients, and you can see it in our data as well, have reported there is so much more impact from concerts and big events post-COVID than there was pre-pandemic, which is actually really interesting to see in the data. And I think to tie into that, if you were around at lunch, Adam Sachs got up on stage again and gave us some pretty fantastic singer-songwriting talks about inflation and the economy and hotel demand set to the tune of some pretty famous songs. And he covered Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, and Coldplay. And I can only assume he did this on purpose because all three of them are touring right now, and all three of them are having massive impact in every single market, hotel performance in every single market that they touch.
I mean, it is really, we talk so much about Taylor Swift for obvious reasons, but it is interesting. It's so much more broad-based than that. The other interesting thing I heard was just in the Wind Down with the Bosses session that is closing down right now as we speak. Nicole Young from Rosewood mentioned that the industry was drunk on leisure demand, which is appropriate for the setting. But I want to ask you, Kelsey, can we extend that metaphor, and are we facing a hangover?
I don't know that I'd say we're facing a full hangover. Maybe we had some Pedialyte before bed and that'll mitigate it a little bit. I do think rates, they have slowed, and I expect they will continue to slow. It'd be a little unrealistic to think that we can hold rate growth double-digit forever. And as inflation moderates, you have to remember we don't need rates to be that high. As it gets closer and closer to 2%, we can get closer and closer to 2% as well and still be making gains.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you the last word, Kelsey. Anything you think people should know, anything at all that you think people should take away from today?
I would say take away that we're normalizing. We're not quite there yet, but it's going to be an interesting path and not necessarily a bad one.
All right. So with that, we'll sign off from Nashville and hopefully not wake up with a hangover tomorrow. Want more of the latest news and insights from across the global hotel industry? Head to hotelnewsnow.com for up-to-the-minute breaking news and subscribe to the new Hotel News Now podcast to hear directly from industry leaders. Available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find podcasts.